Welcome back to the Freedom First podcast. We are your hosts, Blain Smothermon
and Eric Hearn.
This episode is brought to you in part by Jeffries Firearms Training.
Shooters making shooters. For more information, contact owner Ronnie Jeffries on Instagram at Jeffries Firearms Training.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode. We're so honored and privileged you continue to tune in and listen to our special guest and everything we have to offer. Our guest this week is a New York Times best-selling author, a former Navy SEAL sniper, and an avid outdoorsman. He is the author of The Terminalists, True Believer, and Savage Son. He led special operations teams as a team leader, platoon commander, troop commander, and a task unit commander. Over his 20 years in naval special warfare, he transitioned from an enlisted SEAL sniper to a junior officer leading assault and sniper teams in Iraq and Afghanistan, to a platoon commander practicing counterinsurgency in the southern Philippines, to commanding a special operations task unit in the most Iranian-influenced section of southern Iraq throughout the tumultuous drawdown of U.S. forces. He retired from active duty in 2016 and lives with his wife and 3 children in Park City, Utah. Most recently, on April 13th, he released his newest book titled The Devil's Hand. So go ahead and check that out. You can visit him on officialjackcarr.com and follow him on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at JackCarrUSA. This was an amazing conversation. We're so honored and privileged he took the time to speak with us. He's done so much. He's served our country and protected us overseas, in uniform, and outside uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jack Carr. Welcome. You have now entered the Freedom First podcast,
where we have conversations with some of the most interesting human beings on the planet.
People who live and breathe in Freedom First mentality. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Freedom First podcast. Today we have on an amazing guest, a former Navy SEAL, over 20 years as a platoon commander, and a New York Times bestseller with Savage Son, and he's recently going to be releasing a new book called Devil's Hand in April. We're so excited to have him on. There it is right in the background. We're excited to have him on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jack Carr.
Thank you so much for having me. Awesome to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate your time, appreciate your service, and it just means a lot to us, and we're excited.
Awesome.
So on the Freedom First podcast, we have a little segment called the Freedom Minute, and so just some rapid fire questions to get us fired up and get us excited and get us flowing through the conversation today. So the first question is, what is your most memorable moment in your career?
Ooh, memorable moment. Probably the end of it, because it's the most recent, I would guess. Maybe my retirement. I had a retirement party at the end of it. There's so many. 9/11, of course. We're in Guam about 2 weeks into my second deployment. And people start knocking on doors up and down the hall because it was about midnight over there. And we went downstairs and watched the Twin Towers fall on TV. And, of course, that was a seminal moment, not just for people in the military, but for the country and the world as a whole. So if I had to choose one, it would probably be the knock on those doors, the phones ringing up and down the hall, and heading down to that basement in the barracks to watch the Twin Towers fall on TV. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And just a crazy time, for you and the whole country and the whole world. So second question, you are an avid reader, an author, writer, and I love the posts you always post on Instagram, just the history behind a lot of these books and a lot of these stories. So if you had to choose the top 3 most impactful books, what would they be?
Yeah, Once an Eagle by Anton Meyer, written in 1968, is at the top of that list for sure. It's historical fiction and follows two guys from right before World War I up to Vietnam, and one of them is an enlisted guy who gets a battlefield commission in World War I. The other guy is an officer already, and he's always like one step ahead of the guy that was prior enlisted as they go through their time in the service and through the interwar years and all that. But it's really a case study in leadership more so than historical fiction. So I'd give it to some of my junior officers as they started out their time in the military, and I'd have a letter that I'd put in the front of it. And in that letter, I would kind of frame what they were about to read and why I was giving them this book. And then I'd say, hey, at the end, there's another envelope. There's a sealed envelope at the end. And you have to read the book, get to the end in order to get my perspective on what you just read, because I don't want to pollute their reading experience ahead of time. So, so I would give that book. So Once an Eagle by Anton Meyer for sure. Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And I put those two kind of together. And then also The Winds of War and War and Remembrance by Herman Wouk. Put those two together as well. And that's historical fiction that really gives you a great education in, the titles really say it all. Winds of War means leading up to World War II, and then War and Remembrance takes you through that war to the end. So I think for anybody, especially in the high school years, probably all of those books would be very beneficial to read in that kind of that junior year time frame if I only had to pick one spot where people could read those books.
Awesome. Thank you. Last question. If you could sit down and have a conversation with anyone throughout the history of the world, who would it be and why?
I think it would be my grandfather, because I never met him, and he was killed in World War II. He was a Corsair pilot, and I grew up with his photos of him and his squadron, him and his plane, the wings that he wore. He was he was a Marine aviator, but he flew off Navy carriers, obviously. So I think I'd like to sit down with him, because he had such an impact on my life, even though he was killed, obviously, many, many years before I was born.
Awesome. And where was he serving at?
He was off Okinawa then, so he was on an aircraft carrier. He was killed by
Okay.
2 kamikazes in May of 1945. In the Pacific Theater. And when I was growing up, there was a TV show called Black Sheep Squadron on TV that portrayed Pappy Boynton in the Black Sheep Squadron, with Robert Conrad starring as Pappy Boynton. So I loved watching those with my dad, and that was a little connection to the past, to the medium of popular culture at the time, anyway.
Awesome. Well, thank you for answering those questions and just kind of get us fired up and get us into this conversation. And Jack, you spent over 20 years as in the Navy SEAL in the teams. So what kind of intrigued you to going in the teams? Was it, you talked about your grandfather serving, obviously. So what kind of intrigued you and got you into it? Did you always want to go into the military?
Yeah, it was a calling from those earliest of days, probably inspired by my grandfather and his service to the country. So it was a calling that I answered. There was never really anything else that I wanted to do other than write, and I knew that serving in the military had to come first. So I knew that I would serve my country in uniform, and then after that, I'd write thrillers, the same kind that I'm writing today. And of course, growing up in the 80s, there's no internet. I'm interested in the military. I find out about special operations. I find out about the SEAL teams. And then there's some of my earliest memories are the 1979 Iranian Revolution and hostage crisis. Walter Cronkite counting down the days that we had Americans held hostage in Iran. I remember Desert One. And then, of course, later on, the Marine barracks bombing in '83 in Beirut, TWA 47 hijacking, Pan Am 107, like all those things were very impactful to me at a very formative time in my life. So as I'm studying warfare, I'm studying insurgencies and counterinsurgencies and terrorism. I'm also having that reinforced by what I'm seeing on the news, what I'm seeing in newspapers, what I'm seeing on the cover of Time magazine, on the cover of Newsweek magazine, which were the two that we got at our house growing up. So all those things led me down that path.
So were you, at a young age, were you already kind of training and preparing to go into the military already, like physically and mentally?
Yep. I'm back at Soldier of Fortune magazine. You could send away for a couple, I think it was Betamax tapes at the time, Betamax or VHS. Eventually you had a choice between those two. And they had a couple videos that showed people running the obstacle course. The Navy did a few different recruitment videos in the 60s, 70s, and 80s for the SEAL teams. And I thought, okay, look at there's some guys climbing ropes. So I put a rope up in a tree in the backyard. So I had guys running in sand, and I didn't live on the beach or anything, but I had hills to run, so I ran hills, things like that. So I learned to rock climb and rappel, and set up I was rappelling out of trees and off our chimney, and I was doing sprints and then climbing onto the roof and shooting down with my bow at different angles. So I was just doing anything I possibly could that I thought would better prepare me for my journey into the SEAL teams.
And you grew up in Northern California, is that correct?
Yeah, grew up in Northern California, and yeah, now we're out here in Park City, Utah. But I love the ocean, but I've always been drawn to the mountains, and that's where we find ourselves today, raising our kids in a ski town.
Awesome. So when the question everyone always asks, like, what is, I guess, the key, and I guess getting through Buds number one, and then Hell Week, and just kind of being able to survive that I guess beginning portion. I guess everyone kind of talks about it. It's always the question everyone asks. So what was the key in you, like, getting not only into the military, but getting through Hell Week, getting through Buds, and then eventually getting into the teams?
Yeah, well, part of it is, first you have to be healthy, and you have to, there's certain vision requirements and certain baseline just to get into the military in general. So the first one is deciding to do it, then actually doing it, passing all those things you need to do to get that baseline. Right. And then the next step up is what seems on paper anyway to be a fairly straightforward physical test of running, swimming, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. Past that, okay, that's your next thing. Then what is it after that? Okay, now you're headed to Buds. So now it's training up the best you can, getting to Buds, and then crushing it while you're there. And while you're there, for me, putting things in perspective as far as thinking about all these things that people had done throughout history to give me that freedom to be there in Coronado, California, getting yelled at on the beach and doing push-ups and all that in the sand. So I thought about that quite a bit. I thought about, hey, I'm cold and I have to be up for the next 5 days during this Hell Week thing. But you know what I'm not doing? I'm not waiting for the door to drop on this landing craft to run across a beach with no cover or concealment where I'm being shot at by enemy machine guns from an elevated position. And I was like, okay, that puts it in perspective. I can do some more push-ups here on the beach in sunny Southern California.
So kind of as you've transitioned, like reading your books, they're fiction, but you take a lot of it seems so. You take a lot of your experiences in the teams and embed them into a fictional, in your fictional books. So how much of your books are actually using real events and real experiences from the teams?
Yeah, so most of that comes from the feelings and emotions behind certain events. Like, these narratives are completely fictional, but the emotions behind them come from a real place. And I think that's really what made, especially that first novel, stand out to Simon & Schuster, because they see thousands of these things each and every year.
Right.
And I think that's what really made it stand out. So even though the narrative is fiction, the feelings and emotions behind what the protagonist is feeling come from a real place. So I'm not interviewing somebody like a sniper and saying, hey, what did it feel like to be in Ramadi in 2006? I think I'm going to, take what you tell me, and then I'm going to apply it to another sniper shot somewhere else. And of course, if I was doing that as an author, interviewing somebody, then I would be taking what they told me, and it would be getting filtered through my life experience, through what other people may have told me in other interviews, through biases I might have or preconceived notions I might have, that sort of thing. And I don't have any of that. There's no filter for things like that. So for me, I just take what it was like in Ramadi in 2006, 2005, whatever, and I take that and I apply it to a fictional narrative without any of those other filters that it has to pass through first. Whereas if you didn't have that experience, you just, by the very nature of interviewing someone to find out what it was like, you're passing their information through certain filters before it ends up in the narrative. So for me, that's the real power. And then, of course, there's some things that are inspired by actual events, and I'll change some places and some names, of course, and that sort of thing. But it'll be, other than that, it'll be fairly close to what actually happened, whether it's a character or a situation or something like that. So that all gets woven in there. And for me, I think it makes for a more powerful story.
Right. And that's what intrigues me. Like, as I read the first book, Terminalist, I wasn't like a big fictional type reader. I read a ton of nonfiction, right? And I started reading it, just the pages kept turning, and I could just see the realistic aspect of your experiences from the teams and just your writing, just pulling all that together. And it just seems so real as I'm reading through it. And like, you could tell just the, all the gear that you talk about, like, the gear, like you're not just saying, oh, this was a Navy SEAL, whatever,
I don't have to Google Navy
a rifle
knife and then like put that in there. No, it's like, I can reach around here and grab a few knives. Hey, right now. And like,
right.
oh, there's one.
Exactly.
Always, yeah. Like you can tell on the wall, there's tomahawks on the wall. So yeah, the gear is important to me because that tells a story. It tells a story about that character's experience level. It tells me a little bit about their background. It tells me a lot when I see somebody in real life. So I use that in the novels as ways to develop characters. So it's very natural for me to do it in person when I see somebody and see what they're carrying and how they're carrying it and what they're wearing, what they drive, all those things tell a story. So I like to incorporate that stuff into the novels as well. It's a big part of it.
Right, and it definitely draws the reader in, because how many like movies and series do you watch and you're like, I don't know if that's actually how it was, or like that's not real.
Yeah,
that's
when I watch things, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I try to enjoy them for what they are. But sometimes it's so atrocious that you can't help but notice. But that's just that's how it is. And now that I'm involved in the Amazon series for the first novel, I can totally see how that happens, even with the best of intentions. And there's so many people involved in putting these things together, and there are hundreds of people, and I can totally see how. And then you have to get it to the editing room, so you have to get the camera angles right. So there's so many things that can get messed up along the way that I think I find myself being much more forgiving as I watch things today, because now I can see from personal experience how they can get messed up as you start down this path and create a story being told on a visual medium.
Right, and so as you transitioned out of the teams, how did that kind of work? And I've heard some of your interviews, like this was always a goal. Is that correct? Like you knew and had planned to be an author and to write.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. Since the two things I wanted to do were serve my country and then write thrillers, and a lot of that comes from reading the books I read growing up, because there weren't all these distractions. Like we had the Atari 2600, but you can only play an Atari 2600 for Space Invaders for so long. And my mom was a librarian, so I grew up surrounded by books and a love of reading. And most of the books that I read back then, if they were on the fictional side of the house, they had characters that had backgrounds that I wanted one day. So books by guys like Tom Clancy and Nelson DeMille and David Morrell and A.J. Quinnell and Tracy Pollock and Mark Olden. All these guys have protagonists that were either like special forces in Vietnam, or they were SEALs in Vietnam, or they were CIA guys in Vietnam, or something like that. So I loved that stuff, and I was reading those because I love the stories, and I also knew that these authors did research, and they were doing research into their characters' backgrounds. And so it was kind of, for me, it's like if you wanted to play football one day, you're training and you're in high school or whatever, and you're naturally drawn towards football movies or to books that have something to do with sports or training or football, something you want to do later on. Well, it was the same for me. I wanted to read books in the fiction side and the nonfiction side that had something to do with what I wanted to do later, and I didn't look at it this way at the time. I was solely focused on getting to buds, being a SEAL, serving my country, that sort of thing. That one day I would write fiction, but all that fiction I was reading was really preparing me then to write it later. Even though I didn't look at it that way at the time, it really gave me that foundation because I knew what I liked, knew what I didn't like, and essentially inadvertently I was studying the genre by reading all these things growing up. So when it came time to transition out of the military, I had that background by doing all that reading. I had the background by doing the academic study of warfare, and then I had the experience from Iraq and Afghanistan. So all those things came together at the right time and the place for me to transition out and give it my best shot.
And as you transition and you utilize a lot of those tools from the teams, was it like therapeutic as you started like actually writing and things like that? Because there's a lot of a lot of people don't necessarily, I guess, deal with some of those emotions right away. So were you able to kind of work through a lot of those emotions in transitioning out through the writing process?
Yep, absolutely. Very, very therapeutic to be able to write about these different things in a fictional sense. So for me, it wasn't like, I'm not writing a nonfiction book about my experience in the military and getting it out there. I'm writing a fictional thriller, but I'm getting to explore these different feelings through that medium. And for me, it was just, and it continues to, one, make the stories more powerful, and then two, be very therapeutic in the sense that I get to explore these themes and these issues through popular fiction. So it's great. Yeah, I feel very fortunate.
Right. And as you started writing, I guess, what was the process? Did you go reach out to a publisher, or did you just start writing and kind of
writing? So it's I didn't do too much research into the how, other than I'd read Stephen King's on writing, David Morrell's The Successful Novelist. I read all of Stephen Pressfield's books on creativity. You can read each of those in about an hour. It's called The War of Art. One's called Turning Pro. One's called Do the Work. And all of them really tell you, hey, sit down and do the work. I didn't know that this is like a business. I thought you just wrote and then you submitted something to New York and then you start the next one and maybe do an interview or two. Like, I had no idea that, and maybe in the past that it wasn't as much of a business because there weren't these ways for you to build it. Now today, I can outreach, I can use social media, I have a website, I have a YouTube channel, I have all these different ways to engage with the reader and build a readership that wasn't available to an author in 1975, 1985, 1995.
Right.
Today, you have these options available if you choose to do so, or you can depend on your publisher to schedule you and do that sort of thing. And I do that side as well, but that's more traditional publishing. And they have to allocate their resources just like on the battlefield. If you have multiple elements out there on the battlefield, but you only have 2 aircraft or whatever else, like you have to allocate those resources to who needs them the most. And so publishers, same thing. They have a finite number of resources and of people working, and they have thousands of authors, and they have to figure out, they have to prioritize where they're going to allocate this expertise and these resources. So for me, I thought, okay, whatever they do on that side, wonderful. I'm going to build this on my own. I'm going to look at other industries. I'm going to look at how they've utilized some of these different platforms in order to expand their outreach and build their businesses. And it's really a startup. So I wasn't really anticipating that at the outset, but that's very, very, very soon thereafter, I realized that that's part of it. Like, you have to build this. And that's been very interesting to me because I didn't anticipate that at the outset. I knew I'd have to write, but I didn't know you'd have to do all these other things. And it's fun for me to learn and adapt, just like I did on the battlefield, but now I'm doing it in this space. And if I mess up something here, like if I post something or something doesn't work, I do some sort of an outreach thing and it doesn't work. Hey, you know what? That's okay. I learn from it, kind of like in jiu-jitsu. You win or you lose, or you win or you learn, or you learn. Same thing in this space. But process-wise, I just did what came naturally, which was, hey, 1-page executive summary for multiple different books. I chose the one that I thought would be the most hard-hitting out of the gate, the most visceral, the most primal, most likely to get noticed by a New York publisher. And then I took that and then switched that 1-page executive summary into an outline. And I didn't as I went along, I don't think I got this from anywhere, but as I went along and got stuck somewhere in the outline, I didn't sit there for days and try to solve the problem. I moved around it and I continued going, knowing that this isn't happening real time on a battlefield. And over the next year and a half, however long it takes to do this, I'll solve that problem. Like, I solve problems very aggressively on the battlefield. You know what? Here I can take a breath. I can sleep on it. I can let things develop. I can go back and edit. And I can do all those things that I couldn't do out there on the battlefield. So I didn't get hung up or get like, how's the protagonist going to get out of this? God, no one's ever going to buy this. They're not going to believe it. No, I just went right around and kept going. So then I took that outline and then started writing. And that's how it's been for each of the novels thus far, to include the 5th one that I'm working on now.
And how did it feel to become a New York Times bestseller with Savage Son?
So that was a good one. So I'm so busy all the time that I'm really bad at stopping and taking a breath, because I'm always like, how can I do it better? What else can I do? How else can I build this? Go, 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 go. So people are asking me, hey, about the Terminalist series with Chris Pratt. What's it like? I'm like, I haven't even had a chance to even stop to even think about that yet. But when I got the call about the New York Times bestseller for Savage Son, that was really cool. And it was really cool because I hadn't gone on Rogan yet. I hadn't gone on Tucker Carlson yet. I hadn't, Chris Pratt hadn't said anything yet. And that means it was all grassroots. Like, it was all a reader taking a risk on me and telling a friend. Whether it was in person telling a friend, or doing a post about it and telling their 5 friends or 10 people that follow them, or 20, or whatever it might have been. It was all grassroots efforts, veterans, hunters, tactical shooters, readers, like that's what built it. So now I am very happy that Chris didn't say anything until after it hit the list, that Rogan didn't have me on until after it hit the list. So I kind of wanted them to do it in the lead up. I was like, I wish they'd say something this week, or
right, yeah,
Rogan would ask me on this week, but it didn't happen until afterward. And so now I like that, because no one can say, hey, the only reason you hit this list is because Rogan had you on, or because Chris Pratt said something. Well, no, it all happened grassroots, which makes it, for me, much more meaningful and much more powerful. So that one felt good. Everything else, though, it's been like so crazy. I really haven't taken time to take a breath.
No, it's so cool. Just like the grassroots of it, all the service guys. I know, like Black Rifle, like Evan Hafer, all those guys were really pushing it. And all those guys, like, it's so cool to see that without even going on, you said Rogan, until after. So that part's just super cool to see, and it's taken off ever since.
Yeah, it's crazy. And those were all, personal relationships and all that sort of thing that were all, authentic and real. And even with some of the bigger companies like SIG, I carried that SIG forever. I know the people that work there. I knew them from years past, from going to these industry shows. Wanting my guys to have the best gear possible as we'd go down range. So I just, this naturally being so in tune with those industries, the firearms industry, the hunting side of the house, with gear manufacturers, whether it's specific to hunting or just the outdoor space in general. All that stuff, really helped out. But it was all natural. It wasn't like I was like, hey, it would be really good if I got this company to say something about the book. Let me see if I can know anybody there. It was like, no, I already knew these people for the last 20 years, and plus in some cases. As they're excited to see me transition, and they've known I wanted to write. Now I'm in this next chapter in life, and they want to help out. So it was really, I don't know. It feels good, and to have it work out that way. And I think the people that are viewing, or the people that are following along, I think that resonates with them as well. It's something you can't really fake.
Yeah, and I think your personality, you're so humble, and it resonates, so much with, people like me and everyone around the world. Because you do have those people that push it out, and that, they do, and you have to, I guess, a little bit to promote your own self, but you're so humble, and I think that attracts so many people, and it definitely attracted me to Terminalists, and now I've just continued reading, and it was such an honor to get the Advanced Reader's Edition of Devil's Hand, and be able to go through that before it's released in April, and I'm excited about that. And you do have Terminalist. It's going to be turned into a series played by Chris Pratt, which is super cool, and a few other actors that are also very heavily involved into supporting military and things like that as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. We had a great cast, and Antoine Fuqua is directing. He was the only person I ever wanted to direct. He's directing now that it's a series and not a movie. He's doing the first episode, and then they have different directors for each episode. But he's just fantastic. Gene Triplehorn, Taylor Kitsch, Constance Wu. We have such a great cast. We'll see. It's my first experience down this road, so I'm learning. I've learned a lot about screenwriting, and then just this process. It's like a military deployment, getting all these people together and getting everything set up at the right time in the right place to actually start filming. It's crazy. Like, I'm still just in awe of how they actually pull it off.
Right. And do you know the timeline for that? Like when kind of release dates?
I think early 2022, but that can always change depending on out if something gets delayed for COVID or for other reasons. So not exactly sure, but I would guess sometime in 2022, I would say.
Right. And as we kind of in today, talking about Devil's Hand. That comes out April 13th.
That's right.
I don't want to, spoil too much of that, but would you kind of briefly talk about that, the book and kind of the storyline behind it?
Yeah, so each of the books, and I got this from Stephen Pressfield, and I'm really glad that I misinterpreted something he said, because I've been a fan of his forever. Now we're friends, so I know that I misinterpreted something he said. I thought that he took a note and put it next to his typewriter with the theme of his book in one word. And so I was like, okay, revenge. So I had revenge on my computer right there. So as I was typing away, I was like, okay, if it doesn't either directly or more importantly, indirectly lead back to that theme, it's out right away. So I was kind of editing as I went along, which most authors will tell you not to do. But I was kind of self-editing as I went. And I continue to do that today. It's hard for me to go on if I don't have what's already been written up to a certain point that I'm happy with, knowing I'm going to go back and edit it and smooth it, refine it. But there's a certain point that's very subjective as to what that point is that'll allow me to now continue on to the next chapter. The second one, really a story of redemption, finding that next purpose in life, that next mission in life, learning to live again. Third one, Savage Son, was really about exploring the dark side of man through the dynamic of hunter and hunted. And then this fourth one, The Devil's Hand, is something I thought about a lot in uniform, and what I continue to think about today, which is what has the enemy learned by watching us on the field of battle for the last 20 years at war? So essentially we have Iran, we have China, we have Russia, we have North Korea, we have super empowered individuals, we have terrorist organizations. What have they learned by watching us in Iraq and Afghanistan, other places around the world, and what have they incorporated into their battle plans? And what have they learned from COVID? So as I was writing this, COVID's happening. I was doing my research ahead of time in 2019, from like August of 2019 through January, February. And it was really, and it had a bioweapon component to it, an infectious disease component. So I'm doing all this research in the fall of 2019. And then, so when COVID hit, I was hypersensitive to all that stuff. And then I thought, okay, what is the enemy now learning by watching our response to COVID? What are they learning by watching what's going on with the civil unrest in our cities this summer? What are they learning from this contentious political season and election? They're not just looking at that stuff with a passing interest. They're taking lessons from it. They're drawing lessons and applying it to future battle plans. So that's really what The Devil's Hand is all about, is what has the enemy learned, and what are they applying to a future attack on this country? So I think about that all the time, and I decided to explore it through this medium of a fictional narrative.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever a how to turn a bad situation, kind of, it all came together with COVID, and I'm kind of reading through this book, and it's just, everything's just kind of clicking the entire time. And I do want to say one thing, the characters, it's so intriguing, and like I said, I don't want to give too much away at all, but like one of the characters, which is the president in this book, I thought it connected me with JFK. Just kind of having that sense of, a Democratic politician, but also, pro this. So kind of in that centrist, kind of a centrist mindset a little bit, which I think we definitely need more of that today. So yeah, those different characters really stood out to me.
Thank you.
Was definitely intriguing.
Yeah, I love that character. And I really like characters that I don't have much in common with, exploring them, because my protagonist has a background similar to mine. So it's very, natural for me to be able to put myself in his shoes in these different situations. So it's really fun to create these backgrounds and these personalities and develop characters that have nothing to do with me and my background. So one of those is the president. I came up with him in the fall of 2019, like September 2019. I was developing that character, and yeah, a little younger than our current president, but I wanted into some things that I don't even know if would be a possibility really today. But I offset him with another character who I don't really develop too much. She's just there. The vice president has to go farther left for that in order to allow him to run and be the party's candidate there. So in real life, could you have a president like that? I don't know, but he was a awesome character, and I wanted to but you're right, I had to go into the past, had to draw some parallels to JFK and a couple other politicians out there, and create this new president. So he was a fun one to create, that's for sure.
Yeah, because I was reading it, and there's like a little segment in there talking about the book Profiles of Courage. from JFK and kind of that relation. So I loved how you kind of created, a lot of policy and politics and kind of just going in that, I don't know, trying to make that wave in there, and all the policy and the politics in the book that relates to today as well as in the past. So, again, thank you so much for your time. I do have one last little segment.
Yeah.
So we have it. It's called the Freedom Fighter of the Week.
Ooh.
So this is someone who's been influential in your life, in your career, in helping you get to where you are today. So Jack Carr, who is your Freedom Fighter of the Week?
Ooh, I think I'm gonna go with Emily. There's so many choices. Like, as you said that, I have so many in my head right now because I've been very fortunate to run across some very amazing, just some incredible people.
Right.
But, I'm gonna go with the person who took a chance on me. My editor and publisher, Emily Bestseller at Simon & Schuster. She something stood out to her about that first novel, and she took a risk on me as somebody with no following, no national standing as far as being a sports figure or a politician, or have these social media platforms where you can sell a certain number of books because of this 5% or whatever will actually take the action that you want them to. Zero. There was zero. And there's tons of people out there that she could have invested her time, energy, and effort into, and she decided to take a risk on me as a new author. So I'm going to go with Emily Bestseller, who I will forever be indebted to for taking a risk on me and making this next chapter in life possible.
Great. And what would you leave, our listeners that maybe they want to be an author, maybe they want to go into the teams, just kind of combining all those together, mindset. What would you leave them with? How to reach their full potential and be successful?
Yeah, so we only have a certain amount of bandwidth, and kind of the thing I've lived my life by is to never pay attention to the odds. And I don't mean that in a literal sense. I mean, hey, take it as a data point, and you should take it as a data point in that, hey, if it's tough and many people aren't going to do it, well, that's the draw. So a lot of that is like for buds, okay, 80% attrition. Okay, for me, it was like, that's awesome. I'm going to be in that 20% that makes it. And then I spent all the thought that I gave to how hard it was. Same thing with being a published author. I didn't pay any attention. It's hard. Okay, I'm going to do it like that. I didn't waste any bandwidth because you only have a certain amount to work with. And so take that energy, take that effort, and focus it on things that are going to get you to where you need to go. And you're going to get knocked down along the way, for sure. That's a part of life. So don't get discouraged when you get knocked down. That's a part of it. Like, that's going to happen 100%. So don't let it be a surprise when it happens, but you're going to get knocked down and then you're going to get back up. That's how you do it. But also the way in which you get back up is important, not just for you, but for those around you, because you're an example to them, how you get back up when knocked down. So my main thing is, hey, don't pay attention to those odds. Just get out there and do the things that you need to do to put in the work to get you where you need to go. And then as an aside, like I tell my kids, I say, hey, never miss an opportunity to make somebody's day. So I try to keep that in mind as well as going down this journey of life.
That's incredible. Yeah. Thank you for those words of advice. And, it's, someone coming from someone from you, it's so impactful. And Jack Carr, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your service, in uniform and outside uniform, with the books and everything else you do to just promote and advocate for those of service and, the wounded and everyone else. So I thank you. I appreciate you taking your valuable time with us today. And I hope you and your family much success and much health.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I sincerely appreciate it and hope we can do it again soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We appreciate you and your support of the show. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave feedback on Apple Podcasts.